Okay, now I'm going to officially start. I'm going to welcome you to team webinar number 9, which is about humility, Anavah. And we're going to explore the midah of humility in this lesson, applying it to both our relationships with others and to our relationships with the earth. We also have a lot of important pieces of business to attend to. But before we do any of those, I'm super excited to introduce you to Matt Barr. He's the creator of our new Musar mixtape materials, and he's going to give us a bit of a sneak preview and tell us about it. So I want to start by welcoming him. I'm going to introduce you officially. He's a hip-hop Jewish educator and the creator of our curriculum. The materials are going to be available beginning in September. If you're going to Cage, you'll see that Matt's going to be doing a program on Monday night, the second night. He is very cool. He's been featured on MTV's The Real World and NBC's Hip Hop Nation, Notes from the Underground. He's opened up for Grammy-winning group Outkast, as well as for the Hasidic Jewish reggae musician Matisyahu, who we all love. This project is an outgrowth of the success and excitement he discovered when he introduced Bible raps into his classroom. Matt was a fellow at the Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies in 2009 and the Present Tense Institute of Jerusalem in 2007. But all this doesn't tell you what it's like to work with him. He's a deep thinker and a really creative person, and you're going to love what he's done. I'm also going to give you a little background about hip-hop in the Jewish classroom in case you're wondering why hip-hop has so much potential in the Jewish classroom. So according to Billboard, in 2017, hip-hop became the most popular genre in the world, officially taking over rock and roll's 60-year reign. The Broadway phenomenon Hamilton, the generation is beginning to see the appeal of rap and its great potential for education. Matt Barr has been using hip-hop to teach Judaism and aims to make educators comfortable using it in their classrooms for years to come. Okay, now Matt will tell you more, and after he does, we can introduce ourselves to Matt and ask questions. And I want to also acknowledge Sarah. I see you're there, so I will read anything that you need to have read. Okay, go ahead, Matt.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you this morning.
Hey.
I run the organization I run is Bible Raps. Have you ever anybody heard of that? So it's basically just to make it less intimidating. The way you can see it is both using the materials that I create as a source or a midrash. So as the 11th century sages in Spain were writing poetry in Arabic, Arabic poetry, because that's what all the kids were into. It's a common tactic of midrash Agadah individuals to use the hot genre of the day as a bridge to the sources. So that's what I do with my sources. The way I kind of discovered how it worked well was when I was teaching Hebrew school as well as pursuing music, I was kind of an average Hebrew school teacher, and I didn't have my lesson prepared for Passover. So on the way there, I wrote a rap about the 10 plagues, like Moses at the Red Sea, who's gonna follow me? Pharaoh's in the tide, we gonna ride to our destiny in back of me. So sad to see them bodies in the Red Sea. And all the kids from that, just using this rap 3 minutes as a foundation for a lesson, suddenly I became an excellent Hebrew school teacher, and it made my job a lot easier. So the hope is that I can take my sources with me and one other individual rapper, and you can use them as sources that as a teacher won't be too strange, because it's just like bringing in another source. But for the student, it's like, what? There's a rapper teaching us about Judaism and how they've looked at text and how that text has been influential in their life. And I've been doing it for about the best 9 years. All over the country, Israel, England, South Africa, Australia. So it's great, though, to work with Chai Mitzvah because of Nina's curricular mind. So I kind of have these big ideas she helps bring down to earth. In terms of why I think rap works very well and why it might be worth stretching your limits as a teacher to see if this is something that's utilizable. You know, we're the people of the book. The universe, according to the Torah, was created with words. You know, the I've never, even like prayer. Think about how Jews pray compared to how a Buddhist meditates. You know, a Buddhist is like takes one word and goes, you know, whereas a Jew, when they pray, it's like, and you know, there's only thing that kind of has this emphasis on words in so many ways. Hip hop, the only thing that matches even like the clip of word per second of Jewish prayer is double time rap. Ain't afraid of what I made, a contemplative, innovative, proud to say that I'm a native. So, you know, there's all these intersections of emphasis on words, on texts. Rabbis and rappers are both obsessed with words, and the different ways we can use it. So it's a natural space for rappers who also have a deep connection with Judaism to be a midrashist. So we'll provide some videos, songs that will be used as sources, but then there's also using hip hop as a way for the students to process the material. So they might study a source and then write a rap about their reaction to it, or there's a worksheet where they respond to questions in rap. The good thing about rap is you don't have to be able to sing well. It's really, if you can do a nursery rhyme, you can rap. So it's very, you know, I do this down to fourth graders. I have fourth graders writing their own raps on their own. But also part of hip hop is it's not just the rapper, it's also like graffiti. So you can have illustration as part of kind of the hip hop curriculum in the way they process the material. You can have, you know, you can make videos, and that'll be kind of what all the Musar classes will follow the normal way you've been doing it, except it'll incorporate some sources by Bible raps to help complement the materials that are there. And at the end, and through the class, there'll be methods of processing material that will be through rap. And hopefully at the end, they can do a final project as a class that synthesizes all their work into a class kind of rap that includes rap, but also video, also illustration, also kind of to make sure the kids who aren't into rap have a space where they can process in a way that they feel is fun and comfortable, just because, you know, fun can be defined, at least in pedagogy, as doing something, being challenged at something you're good at. So I don't want everybody to be people who hate writing raps to have this be the only way that they process material in this curriculum. So there's other modalities. Do you have any questions for me that can help make this a little more clear? I know as a teacher, maybe, or someone who's not into hip hop, it might be intimidating, but I think the way to look at the material is bringing in just another source, but actually having that teacher be there in flesh, like you just press play and the video plays, and it's neat to be like, oh, here's the Rashi of our day, not that I am, but a commentator of our day who lives by this stuff, who's actively working with this Musar material, and also living a life that, at least according to younger people, is kind of the paradigm of cool, which is like, oh, you rap? Oh, you know what I mean? Like, it's, you know, it's not all that, as you can attest to. Anytime any career is 10% what you signed up for, 90% all the other stuff to make the 10% keep going. But nevertheless, you know, me and the other person who's the main rapper in this, whose name is Lefty, who also provides a different perspective on things, we both, you know, are spending our active hip hop artists in the game of rap. I'm more in the Jewish world, and I travel all around. I've worked for hundreds of thousands of students, and he's in kind of the real rap world, you know. But he was raised Hasidic, kind of dropped out of it after about when he was 19. His father was a rabbi who passed when he was 13. And so he has a lot of, over the past, you know, 6-7 years of building himself up by studying people. And so you'll see that his words are very, incorporate Musar and this idea of studying things and having it help build you as an individual. because that's what we're trying to do here, is to try to say, look, you can study, you don't have to just go out in the world on your own. There's wisdom that's there that if you follow to some degree can help you become a better person, which will help you have a more successful life, inner and outer life. And so he and I both provide examples of that by doing our own midrash about the Musar material, while talking about how we've incorporated it into our life and are still working on it.
Right. Yeah,
So.
what I was going to say is this leads me. So what you'll find in the curriculum is you'll have all kinds of texts. You'll have from biblical to things that Matt has composed or Lefty has composed. Like, so there's a whole range of stuff and to be read and analyzed and commented on, and then for kids to internalize and then do their own creative projects about. So as far as teaching it, it's not that different from what you're doing now. It's flexible and you can use the things that work, but it's got so much more depth and it's so creative. It's really awesome.
You know, just one last thing before questions. Another thing that we're trying to, you know
how like they move those big old mobile trailers,
is this, I think hopefully, well, I'll leave questions. You can see like interacting IG with Rapping Rebbe. Like when I go to Hebrew high schools or perform, you know, as soon as they get out of their class or they have a break, they all rush to grab their phones, you know? So the fact that we actually exist, and you can say, when you grab your phones, you can actually ask a Rapping Rebbe a question. Like to like be part of their social media identity, a chavruta over social media almost, is something that like it's you know, is possible. And that's a lot of these people, a lot of these kids' identity, a big space of their identity is the social media world. So to kind of like infiltrate that a little bit is also like it's ambitious, but it's something we're beginning to experiment with because it's inevitable. So any questions, or Nina, take it away.
Yeah, let's introduce ourselves to Matt. And you know, I see Sarah. I don't see her on the video, but she did text. She said, "We loved having you teach our kids how to write their own Bible raps at CBI in Austin."
Nice. Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there anybody who has any questions about anything having to do with this? Either how it would be for you to teach it, or what kind of texts there are, or you know, that kind of thing. We're all good. Bonnie?
Yeah. I was just wondering what it would look like. I mean, I guess I need an example of how it's done.
So you see on the screen the sample page?
Uh-huh.
So it's not that different from what you have now in terms of the parts and the introduction, the text, the conversation. But you see this photo of Matt. You click on that and there's a video, awesome videos. So you show that to your class, and then you have conversation questions, similar ways. And then the activities you'll have are, you know, they're given to you the same way as they are now in the current Chai Mitzvah, but they're different activities. And it's like a layer, it's one layer more, because you do the same thing you're doing now, but during their break, the students can IG Lefty or Matt. And some of the sources, instead of just showing them on your smartboard or printing them out, you can show them on your TV if you have like a TV in school, or project them. And you can still print out stuff and use it the same way. And so it's similar, but it's got more, it's a little more hip and
Thank you.
And follow up, was that Rachel who asked that question? Yeah, so I think I can understand. I think that makes a lot of sense. You know, and so there are examples that that show, oh, this is how we made an activity called the 10 Plagues, where the students read the 2 lines, and then we go down the line and they're rapping the 10 Plagues. We could show video. We have videos of that. We have videos of what a workshop video looks like. So, and it shows the process of them writing it and recording it and what that looks like. As well as just if you just click on the examples on this curriculum, there'll be an element of it'll be intuitive of what's happening. I think a little more, like you said, you need to see how it works. But I think when you do see it, it'll be a little less intimidating, because you'll see that we're trying to take care of all the rap part, you know, so you can say, okay, Now I'm just the teacher here. I don't have to make sure that that rhymes with that, or like that I can beatbox or something. You know?
You know what we'll do in the follow-up email? Let's send some links to things that they might want to click on.
Okay.
That's good.
Nina? And actually for Matt, when you do this, does it come together with the kind of objectives of lessons that they can take away that have some depth and meaning? I'm worried that sometimes we've incorporated rock music, folk music, every kind of musical genre you can imagine forever, and so I think this is wonderful for taking this today. And one of the downsides is we tend to get so enamored with the appearance.
Right. Yeah, I understand your question, Harley. And in doing this for the past 9 years, I have one eye on the rabbis and one eye on the students. So that being said, is if you study my raps, you'll see that I'm in court. Like, for example, even just that, which is even that just that I did in the beginning. Moses at the Red Sea, like, who's gonna follow me? Pharaoh's in the tide. We're gonna ride to our destiny. And back of me, so sad to see the bodies in the Red Sea. So why did I say, is it sad to see that the bodies are in the Red Sea? Why is it sad that our enemies are dying? Well, that's a source about the angels.
Right.
So embedded in the lyrics are the depths of the sources, right? All throughout. Or, even my job is to make sure the depth matches the other sources you're using. And I would argue that rap is a lot more effective at getting into depth, into complex subject matter than whatever other genre you're using, just by the nature that is normal to talk about depth, complex issues in rap, and identity, serious identity questions in rap. And it's also, you have a lot more space to kind of talk about things. So, like Cain and Abel, single mom going crazy, working 2 jobs, can't provide for her baby. People in Darfur, like, who's going to save me, enslave me? Members of the government, again, acting shady. Man on the streets, next meal is a maybe. It doesn't even faze me. Not that I'm lazy. My coffee is warm and my bagel is tasty. So why would it faze me, let alone change me? What that phrase be? Am I my brother's keeper? Trying to bring, not even preached, almost to be like, wow, I'm not being my brother's keeper as well. But the point being, I'm trying to bring sophisticated dilemmas that high school, 8th grade on are beginning to develop relationships with. So that is a fair worry, but that's also, like, for my material, why I've been successful over the past 10 years is because teachers, rabbis, it's like kid tested, rabbi approved, basically.
It's awesome.
By the way, that was somewhat of a setup question, because Nina had already introduced you for your sophistication and depth.
Okay. Thanks, Harley. I'll bring you on the road.
This is awesome.
I also think the opportunity to ask our students is really crucial, that instead of just having the well when they do journaling, or they try to write their own prayers, and I think that asking them to write their own, to just improvise their own raps, whether in small groups or
Right.
depending on their comfort level, it would be amazing to see what they come up with.
Right. And, it's like, if they come up with something they're proud with, then please, you can send it to us. And then all of a sudden it's like, remember that guy you were learning from? And I can be like, yo, that was ill. Here's a hook for it. Bit, bat, bat, boom. And now there's some kind of relationship, a chavruta, so to speak.
Right. We have our educators Facebook page, and we have our Chai Mitzvah Instagram, so we can go through that.
And what is Matt's email?
Matt@BibleRaps.com.
That's complicated. Okay.
Yeah, I can send it out in the follow-up email too. So that is very awesome. And I think as we get into it and do more of it, you'll see how even more awesome it becomes.
And even like, I have just this, fortunately, I didn't just start working on curricular material. And I'm some of my material is used for like the Jewish Journey Project. Some is used sporadically in hundreds of classrooms. This is the first time I've been able to kind of like work with and consolidate it. And so I have, here's how you write raps, the video, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The key to rap is to have the rhyme on the 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I am Goliath, I am a beast, send somebody to the field so the birds can feast, and somebody to the, so I'm helping, I've become cognizant of all the worrisome elements for a teacher who has no familiarity with rap. And I've been working on, supplying content to take care of that. And I think there's a lot of that to make it so it's not this intimidating kind of like, oh, I'm going to go have to listen to Snoop Dogg now. Like, it can just flow with what you're naturally doing, but the students will be, a little more, there'll be just like a new energy in the classroom that also relates to their life when they're walking around on the street or at school.
Can anybody hear me? Can you hear me?
I can.
Hannah, we always have trouble hearing you.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Now,
I can.
that's it.
Okay. So I'm really excited about the rap idea. I actually did a High Holidays rap 2 years ago for Rosh Hashanah.
There you go.
And I think my kids will love this. But what I'm worried about is the Musar. Like, we sort of got tired of Musar. And so I'm just going to say it's going to be the same thing, but from a different angle way of doing it. So how different is it? And how much are you doing the same topics? But we have?
Good question. I mean, Nina and I still also, we've started Musar, and I think we've become a little more expansive in terms of not being beholden directly to it, to like all these have to do with, like, for example, it started off as wisdom, the first one we did, but it turned into words.
Yeah, it's really about words. The only connection is that wisdom can be found through all different things, but it's really about words. It's completely about words.
So yeah, hopefully it's different enough, and more expansive in terms of what it's not as so specific, I guess.
Yeah.
Is each month's topic the same as it was this year?
It relates to it, but it's not the same.
But I mean, are the 10 topics the same? Like wisdom was the first one.
So for example, wisdom very, very, very loosely is the first one, but it's really, as you see, it's called koach hadibur, word. It's really words.
But I'm just saying, as you go through are they all connected to one of the topics that we did this year?
Loosely connected, just because Chai Mitzvah likes to have each month, like everybody's on the same topic loosely, but I don't think you're going to find repetition. I don't think, and we call it Musar mixtape. It's very, very different from what you did this year with Musar. It's different. You'll see as you go into it. I can also send pretty soon a sample of the first topic, and you'll see how different it is. It's really
Yeah, because I can't read, what's on the screen.
Right. Yeah, different sources, and even the sources are going to be completely different. And we started going specific with Musar, but the more we got into it, the more we found to let it not just loosely be connected to the Musar, to the Musar categorization.
Okay.
Yeah. Honestly, I've been working with Chai Mitzvah for a while. I find that the standard topics are really awesome. And so when we did the Musar, we kind of related it to the standard topics loosely. And I think what we're doing now is, again, making it loosely connected but different, because the whole reason we have different curriculum is so that your kids don't get bored. And you don't get bored, and I don't get bored. Yeah, I don't think you have to worry. It's a great question, but I don't think you need to worry.
Okay.
Anybody else? All right. Well, Matt, you are awesome, and we're really, really glad you were here. And we have a couple links we're going to put in. If you don't mind, make a list. I'll put them in my follow-up email. And Sarah, who is only texting, has an awesome video of her kid working with Matt that she's going to give us a link to. She wants to send out to everybody, which will also give you an idea of what's going on. And I think it's going to be I'm excited about next year.
And they were Austin kids, so it's going to get weird.
Can I just say one thing real quick, Nina? Matt, I'm also in Austin, and I look forward to seeing what Sarah's sharing, and maybe I can hook up with that group. But this sounds very exciting. Thank you for doing all of this hard work.
Thank you guys, and thanks for all the feedback and for being here. I'm looking forward to working with y'all.
Awesome. Looking forward to it as well. Thanks.
All right, I'm gonna leave.
Yeah, unless you want to sit and listen to our agenda, you probably.
All right, I'm gonna go. I'll see you all later. Be well.
Thanks, Matt.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
It's good.
Okay, so now Sarah showed up. That's interesting. That's great. Great. So I'm really glad that you guys got to meet Matt. It's been a real interesting time working with him. He's very creative, and I thought I was creative, but he's like way out there. But he also is deep in that he is not just throwing stuff around. Sarah, you worked with him, so you know. Anyway, so let's go to our agenda, and let's just go through some of the things we have that are important before we get to our topic, which is actually really interesting as well. I want to thank the people who contributed to Chai Mitzvah Month. It was really nice, and I was excited about it. It was a great way to share your social action projects. We don't have to stop just because the month is over. I know much school is, wrapping up and running down, but if you have anything else you want to share, either end of the year social action projects, your ending ceremonies, anything that you do, please, feel free to keep doing it. I know that people want to know about the stipend, and I would too. So here's how it works. You've all ran great programs the whole year. I'm going to send out within the next week or so, as soon as I get back from Nachas, I'm going to send out a survey. I'm going to ask you to send it back by June 25th. As soon as we get your survey, we send the stipend check. Sarah, I don't know if she's trying to talk or if she's... Shireen, are you speaking? Because I have you muted.
I muted myself because somebody keeps coming in and asking me questions, so I was just muting so that you guys didn't have to hear that.
Oh, that's good. I saw your mouth moving.
I'm listening, so I turn it on when I try to say something, but I just don't want you to have noise.
Oh, that's fine. That's great. Thank you. I just didn't know because I saw your mouth moving. I know you're trying to ask me. So as soon as you fill out the surveys, you will, the stipend checks will be sent out, which is wonderful. And I also, it's not worth as much, but I really enjoyed working with you guys this year, and I want to thank you for working with me. And see what else I need to talk about. So I'm going to be going to Nachas next week. That's the North American Association of Congregational and Community Hebrew High Schools. It's an association of high school principals, Hebrew high school principals. I went last year as well. It's really a great organization. They do a lot of interesting stuff. I'll send you a link to their website if you want to check it out. Also at Cage, we're going to be running, I don't know if any of you are coming to Cage, we hope you are. We're going to be running an educators luncheon, a high school educators luncheon. And we'll discuss issues that teen educators have. If you are thinking of coming to Cage, please let me know. Chai Mitzvah might have some special opportunities coming up. So we'll see how that works. Any questions or comments on that stuff? Okay, well then, let's get to our topic. It's interesting because after doing all this work with Matt, which has become pretty intense just the last couple of weeks, the theme of humility, it's interesting in two ways. One, I never thought of rap artists or hip hop artists as being humble. Like it's always been about like, my name is this but one of the other people he works with when we met explained to me that that's been left out of what rap is really supposed to be. So that's just a comment. And also, it's just interesting to me to see how it relates to me personally and how all of us can relate to it personally. So let's look at it. And in this midah, we're also relating humility not only to our own personal relationships and our views of ourselves, but also to our relationship with the environment. So we say when we take up too much airspace in a conversation without considering others, or when we spread our belongings out on the bus or the train or in the public space, we're behaving negligently in the area of humility practice. And balanced humility is about taking up the right amount of space, neither too much nor too little. And in the context of the climate crisis, we have to consider how we as human beings may be taking up more than our share of environmental resources. And curbing our carbon footprint is both good Musar practice and good global citizenship. So those are the two themes we're going to be exploring. And anybody just speak up whenever you want to. Okay, so the first two texts are both from Genesis, and they're the ones that, working for JNF for all those years, these are like, I could recite this to you head. But they're really important because the text of creation is written twice, as you probably know, in Genesis, once in chapter 1, again in chapter 2, and each portrays a slightly different way of looking at it, a difference in the relationships between human beings and the earth. And we're going to read the two texts, and we're going to look at the difference in the way the relationship is described. So the first one, and God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that creeps upon the earth. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. The other one, and the Eternal took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. So if we're thinking about humility, let's look at even the first one, which, having dominion, you don't think of yourself as being particularly humble, but let's think about if we were created in God's image, how that makes us feel. And I am open to any suggestions that anyone might want to jump in. We often say that we've been made in God's image, so we should try to emulate God, help others, be responsible to the earth. And I think that's probably a humble way of looking at a kind of arrogant idea, an idea that sounds arrogant. So I look at it a slightly different way as well, and that's why I'm asking people to chime in, because I'm about to tell you something that I've always thought that might sound a little weird, but I think that I'm not sure that God created us in God's image. I think we may have created an image of God in order to communicate, because we are not able to explain what God is in a way that somebody else might be able to understand. We compare God to a king or to a father or to a lord. And maybe all of those things aren't exactly what God is, and we know that that's not what God is, but we don't know how to explain it. And I'm really asking someone to jump in here, so your ideas and what you think.
The two things jump out. One is, I think we have to address the apparent male orientation of this depiction of God and the way you translated it, that there's other ways of doing it, including in the second text. Instead of saying God took the man, God took the Adam, and tried to explain Adam as a hermaphroditic character. So that.
Yeah, good point.
Which is a big part of the ego issue. The second thought from what you were just saying is Arthur Green talks about how one way of dealing with the issue of did God create us in God's image, or do we create God in our image? Imagine one of those funhouse carnival mirror rooms where you have a mirror that goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and you never know what is where it starts. Okay, all you know is you've got images that keep bouncing back and forth and bouncing back and forth. So that for teenagers, what can be helpful then is to look at what does the image of God mean? What are the as it gets back to Musar, what are the traits that make up what we call this divine image? And how can we live in that image, whether God started it or we started it, to be put off to the side? That's an interesting, important, maybe theological debate, but maybe not that crucial to their lives. Whereas figuring out how to, walk softly in this earth and limit our imprint can be very significant.
Absolutely. That kind of brings us to the next question. The text implies that we put on earth to subdue it and control it, the first text. And the second text kind of says the opposite. So, and I think that it's not black and white. And we might want to ask our students, do you think that our relationship with the earth should be to subdue it some of the time, part of the time, all of the time, or none of the time? Like, where do you feel is appropriate to have your relationship with God? I mean, there are sects of people in India, the Jains, who only eat fruit that falls to the ground. And if it's a fruit that bugs love to eat, they won't touch it because they don't want to take away the food of another creature. That's a very, very humble way of interacting with nature. I don't think that there's probably a single student in any of our schools who does that. So we kind of want to see where they stand. What is their feeling about it?
I think our kids have a hard time with this dominion idea. I agree with you. And one thing that's been useful for me is introducing the idea of stewardship, which includes responsibility. Right. And that helps bring it more to the middle between the two ideas of dominion versus taking care of.
Right. And nowadays, because our health is affected by the environment and we have much more extreme weather than we had previously, I think that this is a nice place to jump off and maybe find an environmental social action project like cleaning the park. If you want any good environmental social action projects that you can do, as I told you, I worked for JNF. I was their education department for 7 years. And I can tell you how to make a rain barrel. I can tell you how to make your toilets in your school use less water. I can give you lots of easy, fun stuff to do. So if you want any of that, just let me know. Those are good projects.
Nina, as I look at this text, I think God shows us how to be humble. God doesn't say, I'm going to make this and I'm going to do this. God says, let us make man in our image, talking to the hosts of heaven, not just, working out of a vacuum in God's self. So I think that by bringing in the hosts and asking, not just demanding or saying, boom, let's do this, I see a humility in it.
That is awesome. And so funny that you said that, because I was talking about this with one of my friends. He goes, what's this us? And you just phrased it beautifully. That's exactly right. It's very important. So that's great that you brought that up. I can't believe you just brought that up, because I was just talking about that, and it's the missing piece.
It's in the energy. It's in the vibrations.
But that is a really important thing. That's also very good advice for leadership. Students are now just figuring out where they fit in the world and how they can, get where they need to go. And that's a very good leadership advice. So that's another thing to point out too. So that's really good. And another thing in comparing the two texts, if you look at the responsibilities that are given to the human beings in both of these texts, which one do they feel is more humble? That's kind of obvious, I think, but they could talk about why. And another thing that's interesting here too is I'm sure that all of our students are aware of environmental things and are of their carbon footprint and all of that. But it would be interesting to find out if they think of that as more a value that was instilled to them as a Jewish value or a good citizen value, or both. Because that's something that, is very important nowadays. and we just might be surprised at what we hear. I think that would be interesting.
One of the your translation of chapter 2, when it talks about working it, it leaves out something that teams might relate to better. That it's not just working; it's benefiting from it. And you look at the conflict that we have, that we benefit, and we're supposed to benefit from all of the natural resources out there, and not feeling guilty, but feel the joy and pleasure that you should get out of using resources, and learn that balance as was described, that stewardship, which is part of our partnership, where you have the thing. It sounds a lot like the mystical tension between Netzach and Hod, between striving and humility and acceptance. That and if they can see that context, it's not they don't have to feel that they're being deprived of things they can enjoy, but they are asked to show discipline and control how they're doing it, and mix in all the traits.
That's a really good point. It's a really, really good point. It's the whole thing of responsibility. You really can't benefit without having some responsibility for that which is benefiting you. So this is
and that goes back to the first text too, dominion. If you have power, you have responsibility. You're not supposed to be, it's like God. It's the same thing, let us do this. It's not, and if you have dominion, like God has dominion, God's still humble enough to say, let us. We, given the power to have dominion over things, should be responsible to make sure that we're using renewable resources, that we are not raping the land, that we are actually making sure that the fish can grow fast enough to feed everyone. And yeah, with authority comes responsibility.
Exactly. I agree. And that kind of brings me to the humility spectrum, because this is where we're going with this. If we looked at midah of humility on a spectrum, it would look like this, with healthy self-esteem in the middle, self-esteem, appropriate sense of self located in the middle, then arrogance at one end and poor self-esteem at the other end. So, if you want to make it very visual for the kids, which elements of this spectrum does text 1 speak to? And we're talking about a self-denigrating relationship with the earth would be like being a Jane and not eating fruit that a bug has already started. And the other end, arrogance would be like, fracking. So we can take it and we can compare it to things that are actually happening, which is kind of a scary thing in my thoughts. But the next thing to do is take this relationship with the environment, and compare it to personal relationships. So humility is not about meekness. Moses was a great leader, and he was considered very humble. And I have a nice video about that later on, that supplemental material, like a Godcast, which is nice. But start taking this relationship with the earth and relating it to relationships with people, which is pretty complicated but interesting. So you look for a relationship in which neither party is either self-diminishing or domineering. And this might be an interesting thing as well. So talking about how to be a good leader with the us, which I love that you brought up, Rachel, and doing this thing about poor self-esteem and arrogance and being in the middle. It's good in relationship to the earth, and it's good in relationship to our relationship with people. So I am ready to go to the next text. If anybody has another comment on what we covered already, let me know. If not, we can go to this text. I want to give a little background on Rabbi Zusia and Rabbi Elimelech, for those of you who might not be that familiar, just in case. Rabbi Zusia was Rabbi Elimelech's brother. Rabbi Elimelech was 5 years older, and both of them lived in a city in northeastern Poland that I can't pronounce. I think it was called Haikusin. Their father was Reb Eliezer Lipa, and he was the son of a great Torah scholar, Rabbi Elimelech, who Elimelech was named after. So they were prominent disciples of the Maggid of Mezerich. which is also mentioned in this text. They were part of his inner circle of students. And so just having this background is just nice to know. Rabbi Zusia was known for his deep emotional approach towards prayer and his great piety. He didn't write any books, but his teachings were collected in Minorat Zahav based on the memory of his students. So he was wonderful enough that his students wanted to write about him afterwards. So here's the argument they had and how it got settled. Rabbi Zusia and his brother Rabbi Elimelech were once discussing the subject of humility. Elimelech said, if one contemplates the greatness of the Creator, she or he will arrive at true humility. But Rabbi Zusia said, no, one must begin by being truly humble. Only then will he or she recognize the greatness of the Creator. So they asked their teacher, the Maggid of Mezerich, who was right. He decided in this way. These and those are the words of the living God. But the inner grace belongs to the one who begins with oneself and not with the Creator. So when I read this, I was confused. I think it implies that the contemplating the greatness of God would potentially lead to humility. In other words, gratitude is a prerequisite for humility. Do you think that's true in your own experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good thing you could ask your students. And how do you think contemplating the greatness of God would potentially lead to humility? So I think that the very obvious answer is, when you're contemplating nature, which is contemplating one aspect of God, we realize how small we are in relation to the rest of the universe. I also think that when we compare ourselves to people, to all the other creatures that God has created, we can also find humility there, because no matter what we're good at and who we speak to, someone else might have an idea that we never thought of that's really worthwhile. So I think that the contemplating the Creator is really contemplating everything in existence that's outside of ourselves.
Yeah, but it also makes us so big too. I mean, if you think about it, look at all that's out there, the whole universes upon universes upon universes, and here we are in this image, being this here now. That's huge. That is huge. That is big. That's not, that's not small. That is being made in the image of God. That's huge. So where do you start? In essence, you kind of got to look inside yourself and go, wow, the fact that I'm here, but there is something much greater than myself.
And that's putting it right into that nice middle ground where we want to be between arrogance and self-depreciation. So that's really a good thing to point out. That's really nice.
I was thinking as well that if you think back to the last text and comparing with these texts, I mean that we also are part of a larger picture. So it's not only humans, but all of the animals. And we have, what we do affects not only humankind, but everyone else on this earth. So, I mean, that's something to really take with great humility.
Yeah, I always say that we are at the top of the food chain, but if we disappeared, nothing would suffer. If bees disappeared, we'd all starve.
Oh, that's a good point.
It's an interesting thing to think about, that what does the top of the food chain actually mean? What is being at the top? We have to be grateful and recognize the importance of all the other creatures.
Mm-hmm.
An interesting thing.
Tension between the first approach of contemplation, all the greatness, is almost an abstract intellectual approach, whereas the second one of being humble is starting with your own activity. The first one carries with it the great danger of feeling insignificant. And I think one of the big problems when we preach humility is it starts being heard as you don't matter. And we want to be really careful not to, when you talk about controlling your ego, you're not talking about, are we negating our ego? Well, we don't have any point of being here. We're talking to teenagers who get depressed really quickly. And then a lot of us may have the same problems. so that we need to be careful to understand that humility doesn't mean insignificance. It's come from a sense of really mattering, and that if you start with the second, the Zusha approach, which is the behavioral approach, your humility is in connection with pulling back from controlling others, pulling back from controlling the environment while you are still connected to it and engaged with it. So because there's a connection and engagement, you have significance. You don't have power. Rachel used the perfect word earlier, power. You don't have too much power over it, but you got some. That's really crucial.
That's really awesome. That's right. Yeah, it's very important. You're right to not make ourselves less significant. It's a balance, and I think it's also looking outside yourself and using your power in a more connected way rather than just focusing on yourself and what's useful to you. So that's really important. I'm trying to make a mental note to put that in our follow-up email because I think that's really important. So let's look at text 4, which is very interesting also. It's from Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, who you probably know because everybody does, but I'm just going to give a little background anyway. He lived from 1772 to 1810, so the turn of that century. He was a great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. I found it interesting to find out that sometimes the town that he came from is called Bratslav, but sometimes it's called Breslov. And they say that Breslov comes from the Hebrew word breslev, which is covenant of the heart. He was, as you know, a very influential and profound leader of the Hasidic movement. From his youth, he followed a path of asceticism and prayer, but he did warn his followers not to abuse themselves physically. He emphasized living life with joy. And one of his best-known sayings was, "It is a great mitzvah to be happy." He wrote 13 tales, mythical stories of kings and wizards based upon Kabbalistic thought and capturing the essence of his teachings. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I never knew this. I just discovered these tales were known to have influenced later authors such as Franz Kafka. That was something I just learned I thought was very interesting. He died of tuberculosis at the age of 38. Wow. And there was never another Breslov Rebbe to fill his place. But the Breslover Hasidim is still one of the largest and most vibrant Hasidic texts. So let's look at what he said. This is like a poem he wrote. He wrote, "Dear God, guide me along the path of sincere humility. If even I put on airs, stop me. Bless me with a humble spirit, with eyes that see only the good in people, with a mind always open to others' opinions, with a heart always caring of their concerns. Teach me to humble myself even before the lowliest of your children, whose very brokenness brings them closer to you." Okay, so let's talk about that. First of all, do the students know what putting on airs means, you think?
Yeah, I think so.
And what do you think someone might be trying to cover up by putting on airs? That's a way to look at it. I always think it's important to understand people. Sometimes they act in ways that are very annoying, but it's because of a shortcoming they feel within themselves. And I think that's an important thing to point out. And then you see there are 3 indented sentences in the prayer. And you could ask the students, which do they think would be the hardest for them to do? I also felt that just knowing teens that I've worked with, I think I feel like, yeah, you should see the good in people, but not only the good, because you might get, it might not be good for you. You should try to, you know what I mean? I think you should try to be more balanced. You definitely should try to see the good in people, but you should also see if they're not being good. And your mind should always be open to others' opinions, but I feel like you should still have your own opinions. Jump in anywhere. You definitely should care about others' concerns, but not if it means also hurting yourself in order to help them, if you know what I mean.
I mean, kids today, every day, are always looking for some sort of connection or acceptance. and they will put themselves on the back burner many a times in order to make those connections. And what they don't understand is that really being honest and true with themselves is going to open the right doors so that they make the connections with the right people who are actually going to feed their flame, you know, and be passionate with them, as opposed to trying to be something that they're not being happy in a relationship of friends who aren't really friends.
Exactly. And I think this is a great text for bringing that conversation out. I think it's a really important conversation to have. And I think it's a conversation that you can have a few times with the same student before they really internalize it. Because it's very hard to be a teenager.
I also wonder in the context of all the bullying they keep hearing about, that this approach of seeing the good and and openness and caring about everybody is to sidestep the dangers of those people who are not like that, and what they can do to you. And I think a lot of our kids are going to instantly think, boy, I put myself in that position, I'm going to give up.
Right. So that's why it's important to see that middle ground and understand that it's important to see these things, and it's important to see the other side of it as well. And to try to have a sense of self and who you are, not to be dominant over other people, but just to know who you are and not be pushed into a place where you won't be comfortable or you'll do something you might regret.
Going back to what Harley said, wasn't Ruby Nachman one who struggled with depression all his life?
Yes.
So, you know, that's kind of a danger in this text, and, you know, humbling yourself so much that you don't have that, you know, you're not in that middle ground of your chart.
Yeah, that's why when I read this and I read the questions that were in the guide, I liked them, but I thought for teens, while this is all very good and very valid, we have to see the other side as well. I think it's really important.
It's also making me think about, we talk about with teens quite a bit about being tech savvy, being aware of all the messages they get through advertisements and technology and such, and looking at it. You want to look at something in the good, but also being wary of being manipulated to believe something is good when it truly for them in their life is not good. So, I mean, bringing up some of that, you can still be very humble, but still approach things, especially when they come through the media, approach it with kind of a different approach, you know, looking for the good, but also recognizing what isn't good or what is maybe a little shady.
Right. Being humble doesn't mean that you just think everybody's better than you. You have to have a healthy sense of self, just not, just know, like, in your place where that belongs. So I thought that was an important thing. And then we get to some interesting practices. I really like this one. So Rabbi Simcha Bunim of Peshishcha, everyone must have 2 pockets with a note in each, so that he or she can reach into one or the other depending on the need. When feeling lowly and depressed, discouraged, or disconsolate, one should reach into the right pocket and there find the words, "For my sake was the world created." When feeling high and mighty, one should reach into the left pocket and find the words, "I am but dust and ashes." So what we have here is both of these sayings, and the students can make their own pocket blessings. They can decorate these 2 passages and cut them out along the lines and carry in their pockets each day and take them out and read them when needed. So I thought that's a nice thing. The next practice is also very nice. It's about personal space. Since I learned this weight, I always think about it. You might talk too much or too little. Do you take up the right amount of space? So the idea is to go into different settings where you feel comfortable, more or less comfortable, and get a sense of how much humility or confidence you might have in different circumstances. If you're comfortable with how much of a little space you take up in a particular setting, try to calibrate your interaction. So for example, if you tend to interrupt people and talk a lot, try wait, why am I talking, before you speak, in order to give other people a chance to express themselves. Notice how much physical, not just emotional space you take up. and shared space. And you know that I live on a sailboat, right? So both at home and in public, how much space you take up. Take note of your vanity. When do you tend to demand or want attention or praise? And what's motivating that need? It's a good way of getting in touch with your inner self. And then share with the class. You can break into small groups and compose and perform with these ideas. So that could be a very interesting practice. And here's one. It's called Moses as a Midah Model. And again, I have this nice supplemental video you can watch about Moses. So according to tradition, Moses was considered the most humble person on earth because he prayed on his sister Miriam's behalf, despite the fact that she had badmouthed him. I'm sure many of your students can relate to that. Use Moses as a Midah model. Maintain a sense of equanimity. So try to keep even-keeled even when under fire and deal with criticism. So the idea is to work with a partner and flip a coin. If it lands on heads, give a compliment and then a constructive criticism. If it lands on tails, give the constructive criticism and then the compliment, and see how you feel and how you react, and take turns doing this. I think this would be good for not just...
I went to a seminar this week, and what a woman told me was really quite brilliant. She said it's really difficult for people to give constructive criticism. So when somebody gives it to you, even though our first inclination is to go straight to denial as human beings, that's where we go. That's automatic. It's who we are. She said whenever anybody has enough soul to give you this gift, you take it as a gift and you say thank you. Because it takes a lot of courage to give constructive criticism, a true constructive criticism. And so as the recipient of that, it's really important that you understand that A, that's a gift, and B, to say thank you because of how difficult it was to give that gift.
Which brings me to the other Chai Mitzvah curriculum, not Matt Bar, but the standard curriculum. And Unit 3 is all about Tochecha, how to give constructive criticism, and it's awesome. So I don't know what you guys are planning to do next year, if you want to do Matt Bar, if you want to do the standard, but there's some really beautiful stuff in there that I like very much.
Nice.
About that. And it says exactly what you said, that it is a gift and it's very hard, and that's why it's a mitzvah, because nobody would do it if it wasn't. Like, why would you do that? It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something interesting to bring in. Okay, this is bringing it over to the environmental level again. It's a checklist. Place a check next to the things that you and your family already do to make your home environmentally sound. If you belong to a synagogue, put a circle next to those that your synagogue does. Put an arrow next to those you plan to do, and highlight 3 that you think are most important. I don't know if you can see them on the screen. Do you want me to read the things, what they are?
Yes, please.
Live in a solar, hydro, or wind-powered home. And I told you I live on a sailboat with both solar and wind. So that's pretty cool. Grow your own vegetables or fruits. Eat locally produced food, which I think we can all do. Belong to a CSA. Reuse and recycle, and then you can give an example of how you do it. Use energy, LEDs, energy efficient light bulbs. Bike, walk, or take public transportation as much as possible. Turn off lights when you're not in the room. Reduce your water usage, and then there's a little space to put what you do. Buy and use energy efficient appliances. Insulate your home so heat doesn't escape. Dry your clothes outside. Consume less meat. Raising cattle uses sources very inefficiently. Purchase food in bulk with less packaging. Use reusable shopping bags. Drive a hybrid or electric car. Reduce your carbon footprint when your family drives. So maintain a steady, moderate speed. Accelerate slowly. Limit plane flights, which leave a large carbon footprint. So those are all things to discuss, and for the kids to see where their families fit in that. And it could be a nice practice as well. And then We have some suggestions for social action. You probably have been doing things and, do things along these lines, but it's nice to check out COJL, the Coalition for the Environment and Jewish Life. They seek to deepen and broaden the Jewish community's commitment to stewardship and protection of the earth through outreach, activism, and Jewish learning. They were selling light bulbs one year around Hanukkah time, LEDs. They do a lot of interesting stuff. Then both sides. So this is just an activity. Part of the great divide in our country today is about our unwillingness to hear opinions with which we might disagree. If, as Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav suggests, it is a humility practice to have a mind always open to others' opinions, switch your news stations. Disagree, keep your heart open, and try to be empathetic. So if you usually listen to media, switch to a more conservative source and vice versa. Try to listen without judgment. Listen to what might really be going on for others. Do you think they could be experiencing fear, a sense of scarcity? Is there even the smallest part of concern being expressed that you share, like any little bit of what they say? And after you do this exercise, you might be able to listen to someone with whose opinions you generally disagree and keep your heart open and try to be empathetic.
One thing I'm learning is how to be neutral, because it's really difficult, even, because if you're a passionate person, you want to be on the side of what you consider right. But we have to remember that truth is a mirror that got broken. Everybody picked up a piece and thought they had the truth. So I'm working on neutrality, and I find that word really works well with other people, because then they don't have to be emotionally saturated in order to understand the other person.
Right. We have a lot of that in my family. I have a very passionate kid who just graduated from college, and she's very idealistic. She's young. And then I have my husband, who's on the other end of the spectrum, and they get into arguments, and I just keep saying, you know what? There are deeper things, there are connections, and yes, it's important to believe what you believe, and it's important to work for what you believe. It's also recognize that there are other connections to people. And so, like you say, agree to disagree and try to remain neutral. It can be very emotionally charged, for sure. So and then another thing that's interesting, meet with students from different background than your own. As a shared activity, you might do some social action or study Musar together. If your school or synagogue already runs an activity of this kind, participate in it as an individual or as a class together. And I know a lot of places do already do that, and I think it's very important to do that, because we really are people. And I think we tend to just be with other people that are similar to us. We don't really have an opportunity to make connections with people who are different. But I think that's important. And it's a good thing to do. Okay, next. Links to additional information. These are good. And then the supplementals I'm really excited about. So this animated films, Jewish Food for Thought. There's one on humility, which is really very good. You would like that. The picture book Zoom. Is anybody familiar with that book? It's awesome. It's a 32-page book, no words, just pictures. And it starts out very small. Like you're really looking at something, but you don't realize it's part of a bigger picture, that's part of a bigger picture, that's part of a bigger picture. And as it draws back, you realize that thing that was so important on the first page is like this little tiny piece of a whole thing. And you can also find this online, slide share at this link. And then there's a Talmudic story about a rabbi who mistreated an exceedingly ugly man. And it's about self-righteousness and forgiveness and humility and flexibility. And that's a good one too. And you can find the text and study questions at this link, which is excellent. And then the supplemental materials. So this Dr. Christine Gibson, it's so interesting. She was in Nepal during a big earthquake, and she was a doctor, but she wasn't a surgeon, and she didn't speak the language. She was there to work on something else, and she wasn't trained in emergency rescue, and she felt really useless. And she had internet, and people from home were saying, wow, I bet you're going to help everyone there. You're going to be so important. And she said that it made her look at the response people have to things, and it made her realize that expertise can be a liability, and that we have to have humility and see where we fit. For her, it was a whole new experience that she wasn't the one saving everybody's life because she couldn't. And it was just an interesting thing. Leadership without ego is very good. Examples from Mahatma Gandhi to Ronald Reagan. I don't know how Ronald Reagan fits in there. I didn't watch the whole thing. I'm not a big Reagan fan. Bob Davis says leadership without ego is a rare commodity, and I'm sure that's true. And then this one, The Humble Leader. It's a cartoon. It's a joint Godcast and Eli talk. It's based on Hal Lewis's talk, It Ain't the Heat, It's the Humility, Jewish Leadership in the 21st Century.
Nice.
Both of those links are really good, and I think you'll enjoy them and find them useful. So that is all the stuff that I have here for you guys. And I'm really, this was such a good conversation. You pointed out such important things to me. I'm going to try to retain them long enough to put them in the follow-up email for the people who weren't lucky enough to be part of this conversation. So thank you very much for joining. Any questions or comments about anything?
Thank you, Nina.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just thinking about the coming year. How do we contact you privately and discuss maybe which of the curricula that we want to use? That's how we do it? Okay.
Yeah, that would be great. And they're all good. I'm very excited about Matt Barr because I've been working with him. I'm telling you, I love the standards. So both of them are great. And we'll talk about your class and what you feel best fits what you need to do. Super. I see Harley waving. Bye. Bye. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for being part of this.
Yeah. Thanks, Nina.
Thank
you.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.